Good morning. Welcome to the Sunday service at First Unitarian Church of St. Louis. Hello, my name is Sue Fazio. I use she, her pronouns. I am a worship assistant. We are glad that you could join us this Sunday, either in person or online. If you are a visitor or a newcomer, we'd like to extend a special welcome. And if you are new to our congregation, be sure to fill a newcomer form out found in the live stream description or in the lobby of the church. After the service at 11:30, visitors and newcomers are invited to join us downstairs for coffee and donuts. If you are attending online, you can connect with each other in the chat, and don't forget that the link for the virtual coffee hour can be found in your weekly e-news. We especially want to welcome any families with children. You can connect with Danielle Kozemchuk after the service for information about our religious education programs for children and youth, or click on the link in the description. We encourage you to take a moment now to send your joys and concerns for the pastoral prayer. You can access the online joys and concerns via the link available in your order of service in the live stream description or with the QR codes found around the sanctuary. There is one announcement this morning. The next step in our community outreach and congregational engagement process is a book discussion on toxic charity, how churches and charities hurt those they help, and how to reverse it. Join Reverend Kim and others on Zoom this Thursday, November 30th at 6:30 p.m. The book is available in hard copy, ebook, and audiobook from the local libraries. Welcome to this religious community where we affirm the dignity and freedom of all who enter. Here we seek to live together in relationship and respect so that we may embrace and celebrate our differences. Our religious values invite us to a shared journey of truth and meaning. Sincerity and connection guide our religious community and call us into deeper association with ourselves and with the world. Welcome, especially on this rainy Sunday morning. We are glad that you are part of our community this morning. Now please enjoy Prelude on El Hesel Christ by Paul Mans, performed by our music director, Earl Nair.
Good morning. I am the Reverend Kim Mason, she, her, hers, and I serve this congregation as your minister. Thank you for braving the rain and the chill and joining us this morning. The Sunday after Thanksgiving is traditionally known as Annual International Intern Sunday. I am not the intern. This morning, we are experimenting, though, with a service that has become a tradition in many Unitarian Universalist congregations called the Question Box service, where I spend our time together answering your questions. There are a couple ways to submit your questions. Some of you submitted them ahead of time. The other way is to submit them live by scanning this QR code right here. There's a Google form on the other side of that QR code. You also had the option to pick up a small piece of paper and a pencil on your way into the sanctuary. If you did so, you can write your questions on the paper and drop it in the offering basket when it comes along. I am not putting any limits on the questions that folks ask. However, I do reserve the right to not answer any questions that might be inappropriate for this setting. I am excited and a little nervous to answer your questions. So I invite you into worship with words from the poet Rainer Maria Rilke and his letter to a young poet. Be patient toward all that is unsolved in your heart, and try to love the questions themselves, like locked rooms and like books that are now written in a foreign tongue. Do not now seek the answers, which cannot be given you because you would not be able to live them. And the point is to live everything. Live the questions now. Perhaps you will then gradually, without noticing it, live along some distant day into the answer. I invite you to rise as you are willing and able and join in singing our hymn of the month, number 404, What Gift Can We Bring? We light this chalice in the spirit of these words by Juliana Lepp. We seek our place in the world and the answers to our heart's deepest questions. As we seek, may our hearts be open to unexpected answers. May the light of our chalice remind us that this is a community of warmth,
of wisdom and welcoming of multiple truths.
Our story this morning is one of my favorite. Do y'all want to come up with me or you want to stay there? Awesome. All right. This morning's story for all ages is called The Three Questions. It is illustrated and adapted by John Muth, but based on a story by Leo Tolstoy. There once was a boy named Nikolai who sometimes felt uncertain about the right way to act. I want to be a good person, he told his friends, but I don't always know the best way to do that. Nikolai's friends understood and wanted to help him. If only I could find the answers to 3 questions, Nikolai continued, then I would always know what to do. When is the best time to do things? Who is the most important one? And what is the right thing to do? Pretty good questions. Nikolai's friends considered the questions. Then Sonia, the heron, spoke. I know the best time to do things. One must plan in advance, she said. Gogol, the monkey, who had been rooting through some leaves and trying to find something good to eat, said, you will know when to do things if you watch and pay close attention. Then Pushkin, the dog, who was just dozing off, rolled over and said, you can't pay attention to everything yourself. You need a pack to keep watch and help you decide when to do things. For example, Gogol, a coconut is about to fall on your head. Nikolai thought for a moment. Then he asked his second question. Who is the most important one? Those who are closest to heaven, said Sonia, circling up in the sky. Makes sense that a bird would answer that. Those who know how to help the sick, said Gogol, stroking his bruised noggin. Guess that coconut got him. Those who make the rules, said Pushkin. Nikolai thought some more. Then he asked the third question. What is the right thing to do? Flying, said Sonia. Having fun all the time, laughed Gogol. Fighting, barked Pushkin right away. Whew, fighting. Then Nikolai thought for a long while. He loved his friends. He knew they were all trying their best to help him answer his questions, but their answers did not seem quite right. Then an idea came to him. I know, he thought. I will ask Leo the turtle. He has lived a very long time. Surely he will know the answers that I am looking for. So Nikolai hiked high up into the mountains where the old turtle lived alone. When Nikolai arrived, he found Leo digging in the garden. The turtle was old, and digging was hard for him. I have 3 questions, and I came to ask your help, Nikolai said. What is the best time to do things? Who is the most important one? What is the right thing to do? Leo listened carefully, but he only smiled. Then he went on with his digging. You must be tired, Nikolai said at last. Let me help you. The old turtle gave him his shovel and thanked him. And because it was easier for a young boy to dig than it was for an old turtle, Nikolai kept digging until the rows were finished. But just as he finished, a wild wind came up and rain burst from the dark clouds. And as they moved to the cottage for shelter, Nikolai suddenly heard a cry for help. Help! Running down the path, he found a panda whose leg had been injured by falling from a tree. The storm raged on, banging at the windows and doors. The panda woke up and asked, "Where am I?" Nikolai had carried her into the house and made a splint for her leg with a stick of bamboo. "What happened? Where is my child?" she asked. Her child. The boy ran out of the cottage and down the path. The roar of the storm was deafening. Pushing against the howling wind and drenching rain, he ran further into the forest. And there he found the panda's child, cold and shivering on the ground. The little panda was wet and scared, but alive. Nikolai carried her inside and made her warm and dry, and then he laid her in her mother's arms. Leo smiled when he saw what Nikolai had done. The next morning, the sun was warm, the birds sang, and all was well with the world. The panda's leg was healing nicely, and she thanked Nikolai for saving her and her baby. Nikolai felt great peace within himself. He had wonderful friends. He had saved the panda and her child. But he also felt disappointed. He had not found the answers to his 3 questions. So he asked Leo one more time. The old turtle looked at the boy. "But your questions have been answered." "They have?" asked the boy. "Yesterday, if you had not stayed to help me dig my garden, you wouldn't have heard the panda's cries for help in the storm. Therefore, the most important time was the time you spent digging in the garden. The most important one at the moment was me, and the most important thing to do was help me with my garden. Later, when you found the injured panda, the most important time was the time you spent mending her leg. The most important one was the panda. And the most important thing to do was to take care of her and make her safe. Remember then that there is only one important time, and that time is now. The most important one is always the one you are with. And the most important thing is to do good for the one standing at your side. This is why we are here. Those are some pretty big questions Nikolai had. I wonder if you have any questions. If you do, if any of you do, go ahead and write them down on your pieces of paper and put them in the offering basket when it comes by later in the service. Each week, we bring our joys, celebrations, sorrows, concerns, and questions with us into this community. We need support in the ups and downs of life. Our interconnectedness offers solidarity and solace. Now is the time in our service when we connect with one another by sharing our sorrows and concerns. This week, in our community, we carry much unspoken in our hearts and minds. We hold all that is tender in our hearts with compassion, that they may be lighter by being in community. And as a community, we also share our joys and celebrations with one another. This week, we celebrate Christmas decorating and all of the friends and family that joined us for our Thanksgiving celebrations. We hold these joys with gladness and celebration. May they be magnified because they are shared. With much remaining unspoken in our hearts and minds, please join me in a spirit of prayer and mindful attention. We begin with words from Lisa Friedman. Spirit of life and love, holy within and among us, we are made of questions. Why is there something instead of nothing? Why do some wishes come true? Why, after millions of years, of life on this earth, does death still sting? Why is it hard for people to learn how to love one another? Why does my heart laugh with the first flower of spring? Questions rise up within our souls, born of fear and delight, sorrow and confusion. Questions live within us, shaping our choices and our search for truth. Here in community, we make a container for the questions. Help us to embrace them and to grow. May it be so. Amen, and blessed be.
This morning's reading comes from psychologist and author Karen Horneffer Ginter. I love the idea of loving questions, seeing the potential beauty that they contain. I don't think we always give questions the time and attention they deserve, often mistaking them as being mere stepping stones to an answer. When used properly, questions have the potential to connect us to the world of another. A heartfelt, "How are you?" or "How was your day?" can become the bridge that keeps us in relationship to the lives of those we love. Sometimes, too, questions can bridge within ourselves, allowing us to hear what's going on at a deeper level. We know when we've encountered a question that has this potential because it stays with us, maybe for the day, maybe for our whole lives. It taps us on the shoulder to wake us up. It wiggles its way in more deeply, opening us up to seeing things in a new way. Some questions are worthy of holding close and not replacing with an answer too quickly. Just as the expression goes, only speak if you can improve on the silence. Maybe, too, we should be taught to offer an answer only if it improves on the question. Of course, such encouragement flies in the face of how we're often taught as students and professionals. It flies in the face of our human tendency to want to feel the sense of intelligence and rightness that often accompany certainty. Maybe, too, it's fair to say that we need to find our way to a certain number of answers before we can feel comfortable spending time in the somewhat groundless world of questions. We need to feel some certainty before we can appreciate that it's this realm of questions that can pull us into places of greater truth, allowing us to see that seemingly contradictory ideas can be right, that light is both wave and particular, that from an aerial perspective, various religious traditions all contain truth. I often encourage my children to stay with these sorts of questions because I don't think it always serves them to land on final answers at such a young age. I'm not really sure they should be answering who is God or what political party do I agree with. I sense that they're sometimes best off in this life stage merely gathering information with an open mind. I remind them, too, that there are some answers our human minds can never fully grasp, and that there may be times when claiming an answer actually moves us further from the truth. I've noticed that such reflections have left me qualifying many of my hopes and requests and prayers, often including an "if it is meant to be" or "if it is to the highest good." More and more, though, I've come to see that often we are best off keeping some space for question marks to be inserted and possibly to remain, especially with the really juicy questions that, over time, begin to guide our way.
The First Unitarian Church of St. Louis strives to be a welcoming congregation, inspiring lives of loving kindness and integrity by nurturing spirituality, building community, and advancing justice. We do that by many ways. One way is by our annual support of the Unitarian Universalist Service Committee through the Guest at Your Table program. To explain more, here is a video.
Did you know that Unitarian Universalists have been coming together for decades to support human rights through the Unitarian Universalist Service Committee's Guest at Your Table program? During this special program, UUs of all ages learn more about important issues and the groups, or partner organizations, UUSC works together with to advance human rights. Working with community-based groups like UUSC Partners is a great way to get help directly to folks after disasters like a hurricane, and helps make sure the needs that are most important to communities are being met. UUSC works with more than 50 partner organizations around the globe, together responding to humanitarian crises, gender-based violence, persecution of activists, climate change, and more. Guest at Your Table is a chance to get to know our partners and these issues better through learning the stories of 4 people connected to UUSC Partners as if we were sharing a meal together. They are the guests in Guest at Your Table. After getting to know the guests, UU spread the word about human rights and raise much-needed funds for UUSC Partners. From supporting youth leadership trainings, to amplifying their voices to world leaders, to buying needed supplies after a natural disaster, our partners request our help with all sorts of projects that make a difference in their communities. Through Guest at Your Table, Unitarian Universalists form a mighty web that helps support UUSC partners in their important work. Thank you for helping keep this important tradition going strong and joining us in the Guest at Your Table program.
There you go. I have to flip the correct switch. If you would like to support the Unitarian Universalist Service Committee this season, pick up a Guest at Your Table box on your way out of the sanctuary this morning. This morning's offering will now be received. Each week, our service is made possible by many folks who work in the behind the scenes of worship. And so this day, I would like to thank our ushers and our greeters who help to make you all welcome as you come in the door. For their gifts of service, for your gifts today and every day. Thank you. And ushers, we have some questions, maybe. Excellent. Thank you. Okay. If your questions lead us to other and more complex questions. We will find, most astonishingly, our own intended life, not someone else's. And so this morning, instead of a sermon, I'll be answering your questions. Some of you submitted questions ahead of time, and so I will begin with those, and then I will get to these, and we'll see how many we get to. That is the beauty of the question box. I don't know what I'm going to get. We don't know how many we're going to get through. And I will not out anybody who sent their question via email. So don't worry that you asked something and now you're going to wonder if I say your name from the pulpit. So our first question. My question is, what does hope mean? I have stopped using the word hope because for me it implies hopelessness. That is so depressing. Instead, I use the values of curiosity, compassion, and nature. However, in the proposed values for you use, hope is used here. Generosity. We cultivate a spirit of gratitude and hope. We covenant to freely and compassionately share our faith, presence, and resources. Our generosity connects us to one another in relationships of interdependence and mutuality. So the dictionary definition of hope is positive anticipation. And so sure, it is easy to feel hopeless if your expectations have been disappointed. It is easy to feel hopeless if you have been working and working tirelessly and not been successful. And yet what this proposed value, this generosity statement lands on, is that generosity itself is an inherently hopeful act. You give, and in giving, you are either initiating, honoring, or cementing a relationship, or you're attempting to make a difference. And to believe that you can make a difference is inherently hopeful. So generosity is an act of hope. But I also want to touch on two things about this question of hopelessness. Because it's real, this feeling of hopelessness. The Unitarian Universalist ethicist Sharon Welch talks about something called cultivated despair. And cultivated despair is when you work really hard to change something, and then it doesn't happen. Or at least it doesn't happen in the way that you think it's going to happen. It doesn't happen in some great, big, magnificent act of all-encompassing change. But it might look like little, tiny, incremental movements towards change. But she says that folks who exist in a life that is privileged, whether that is through wealth or education or identity, aren't accustomed to not being successful. And so they see small incremental steps towards success as failure because they weren't initially great, big, giant, change everything successful. So they don't know how to handle small successes and see them as failures, and they don't know how to accept the failure of not achieving a great, big, giant result. So that's what cultivated despair is, that the way to counteract cultivated despair, this type of hopelessness, is instead to celebrate the small victories along the way. So that means maybe you didn't completely overturn some unjust law, but you made it a little bit better. You didn't completely pass some broad, sweeping change that you wanted to make, but you got some small piece of it passed. And so you celebrate the small things because that makes you one more step closer to the next successful action. The other thing that I want to touch on is this, again, hopelessness. The Latino theologian Miguel de la Torre talks about a theology of hopelessness, which immediately you're like, is that the theology of depression? So as a Spanish speaker, de la Torre looks at the word esperanza, which is hope in Spanish, which directly translates as waiting, or even the root of it, esper, which connects to the Spanish root respirar, for breathing, which is this idea of not just waiting, but literally holding your breath in anticipation. And that in many Christian traditions, this idea of waiting is that you are waiting for God to make a change. You are waiting for the holy in the world to enact change. And so a theology of hopelessness says, we aren't going to wait. We are no longer holding our breaths. We are not anticipating somebody else is going to change things, but that we ourselves are going to enact change on the world. The theology of hopelessness is saying we have the power to bring a new world into being, and that we are no longer waiting for someone else to do it. Which I find, ironically, inherently hopeful. Question 2. Do you think there is a spiritual component to bridging the intention-action gap for religious liberals? In parentheses, for people who don't believe God will reward or punish you. If so, would you elaborate? So I think this is a question about why would you behave in any kind of way to make change or to help others if you don't have a belief in God that impels you to do so. And I'm reminded of the way that we teach coming of age. We ask our high schoolers to write their personal belief statement, a credo. And a credo is literally, I believe, therefore I act. This idea that what we believe informs how we behave in the world. You can also look at it in the reverse. How you behave in the world is a reflection of what you believe. And so whether or not you believe in a God, you have some understanding of how the world works. I believe that the sun will rise every morning. That's my understanding of the world. I also understand humans to exist in a world of possibility. And as such, my faith says we have to make that possibility real. UUs as a denomination are very much shaped by this idea of putting our faith into action. And we inherited it from the social gospel movement of the late 1800s. which said the role of faith and religion is to behave in alignment with our beliefs and to undo systems of inequality in the world. For the social gospel movement, folks found inspiration in the teachings of Jesus and looking at the Bible and saying, Jesus said, help the poor, help the sick, so that's our responsibility. If you are a religious humanist, you don't necessarily have that belief in a God to draw from. But what you do have is an understanding of who humans are as people. And studies have actually found that humanists are inherently more generous and compassionate because they give to others and they work to make change, not because they're supposed to, not because they have a belief in a God that says that that's what they're supposed to do, but because they believe in humanity and in our responsibility as humans with ourselves and with our communities and the world. But on some level, I don't see a whole lot of difference between these two things. There is an understanding that God is not a being on the planet, and thus we are the hands and feet of God on earth. That even if we are impelled by an understanding of a God to make change, it is our hands, it is our work in the world that creates that change. And so whether you believe in a God or whether you believe in the inherent humanity of all people, we are the ones who do the work. That we are together in this and capable of making change. Question 3. I am often asked the question, Unitarian, what's that? I could best answer, as I know, in my own words, but it would be over a cup of coffee or two. Can you offer suggestions for an elevator answer, i.e., brief but comprehensive? For a long time, this has been my answer. Unitarian Universalism was created when two liberal Christian denominations joined to become a single denomination in the 1960s. In doing so, they did away with any creed or doctrine and unite around a set of shared principles which explain how we exist with each other and the world. The first of which is the inherent worth and dignity of every person, and the last of which is the interdependent web of all existence, of which we are a part. Now, some of you may know that those 7 principles are in the process of being revised. And so, if that goes through, what I would say is that when they did away with creed or doctrine, we unite in promoting the values of love, generosity, pluralism, transformation, equity, interdependence, and justice. I think I did that in less than 5 minutes. Yeah? All right. The value, of course, is in writing your own elevator speech. What is important about Unitarian Universalism for you? Question. What are First Unitarian Church of St. Louis's plans to obtain an intern minister? We have posted on the UUA's Internship Clearinghouse with an application deadline of January 15th. We have an intern committee that will be evaluating the applications, and hopefully we'll know who's coming by the end of this church year. So stay tuned. Next question. Why do humans search for answers to questions that are unanswerable? It is natural to seek answers. Knowing the answers gives us the ability to plan, and on the whole, we like to prepare. So a question may seem unanswerable to you or I, but others might choose an answer or find an answer because it brings them comfort. It is hard to live with mystery. I personally like a good mystery novel, not because it ends with a question, but because it ends with an answer, right? It gets all wrapped up and we know who did it. Human beings don't like uncertainty. There's actually a really great New Yorker magazine about that, or article about this. And so in that article, there's a social psychologist, Ari Kruglansker, who coined the term cognitive closure. And so he says, an individual's desire for a firm answer to a question is an aversion towards ambiguity. In other words, we want answers because life is hard, and we don't always know what is the right thing to do. And we have a lower tolerance for ambiguity when we're stressed out or when things are hard. And so you may choose an answer because it makes things a little bit easier. And so I personally think that it's a spiritual practice to sit with questions, to sit in the unknown and be open to the mystery. There is a passage in the Tao Te Ching that I particularly like, and here's one translation of it. Do you have the patience to wait until your mud settles and the water is clear? Can you remain unmoving till the right action arises by itself? And so this is an encouragement to sitting with the unknown, to being present to the world around you, and to letting assurance come to you at the right time and in the right way. Next question. I like to think we are all made of stardust, one with the universe. What do you think? Also, do you believe in an afterlife or another dimension when we die? We are absolutely made of stardust. Quite literally, right? That whether life came into being because a divine, holy being created us or the Big Bang happened, the basic building blocks of life are the same. All these atoms swirling around coalesced to create life. We are all made of stardust. And the beauty of life is that when our bodies die, those atoms of stardust return to the world and become new life. We exist because there are relationships between atoms, the molecules that form. And life is an expression of the energy that passes between them. We are the embodiment of relationship. And so whether divinely created or brought into being by some wondrous coincidence, it doesn't take away the magnificence for me. Life is pretty darn amazing, however it came into being. We are indeed stardust. A question about the afterlife. When my grandfather died, the minister gave the eulogy and he said, "Religion exists so that you know where you're going to go when you die." And I turned to my dad and I said, "Nope." You know, there are so many faith traditions that talk about life after death. And one of my favorite phrases is that we are Unitarian Universalists because we believe in life before death. That we are Unitarian Universalists because it helps us understand how to live now, in our lives now. And our goal is not some promised afterlife, but that we might create heaven here on earth. That we might create the beloved community. And so I am not so much interested in questions about the afterlife. And I do understand that those questions are deeply meaningful for lots of folks. And so when people talk to me, when they ask me questions about the afterlife, questions about the afterlife are shaped around what you understand of life now. So for some people, they understand a loving God that's going to invite them into reconciliation and reunion after death. And for some folks who are humanist, they understand that when we die, and our energy might return to the world. For folks who are Buddhist, we might understand that we are a drop in a giant ocean. We are one wave of many, and that when we die, we return to that great ocean. If we're Hindu, we might believe in reincarnation, and we might understand that the choices we make in our lives now impact our next life. And so when I talk to folks, particularly folks as they are dying, I want to know what it is that you understand about life and what you understand to be true in the world. We are shaped by our experiences. And in the end, it's all a great mystery. And it is 11 o'clock, and I have one more question here and a bunch more here. Maybe I'll start answering some of these in our newsletter columns. How's that? You like that? All right. For now, I'm going to invite you to rise in body or spirit and sing our closing hymn, number 349, We Gather Together. Our closing words come from Ma Teresa Tet Castillo Gallardo. Some came here to be blessed with answers in a tumultuous world. Let us hope, too, however, that many have been blessed with questions that direct us to the clarity of mind, that steer our logic toward kindness and towards justice always. May it be so. Amen. Blessed be, and go in peace. Please stay seated for the postlude. And then when it ends, as your final act of worship, turn and greet your neighbor.